Hey everybody, it's April Wild, your hippie gardener, and today I wanted to share with you how to start a permaculture food forest in your suburban backyard. I want to show you the process I used and give you some tips and tricks using permaculture that'll lower your budget and make your life a lot easier. So let's get started. My first piece of advice is to start small. If this is your first time gardening, start with starting a seed inside and watching how they grow, learning how to get into the method of taking care of something and checking on it every day. To start out, I built a raised bed. You can see here it's 2 feet wide, so far enough that I can reach across it because I have no full round access, and about 8 feet long. I built it out of used materials. That can also help if you're low on cash. You can find used pallets behind businesses by trash dumps. And if you have a big enough truck or a nice enough neighbor with a truck, you can bring some home. And I filled it with some cold, hardy vegetables because I started it in the end of summer. And by the way, I'm in Zone 7, USDA Climate Zone. So our first frost was around October, and mid to late October. So I chose cold hardy vegetables that'll last through a few frosts. It even helps with their flavor, such as radishes, kale, and carrots. I've also added a few calendula flowers you can see here. That was more of just an experiment to see how it would work. I've interplanted these vegetables and flowers in order to attract beneficial insects and repel others and confuse bugs. So the biggest problem with planting things all in a row is it makes it really easy for something harmful to just jump from crop to crop and wipe out everything. Hence interplanting. And I interplanted with things that grow at different rates. So at first this bed was full of radishes along the sides and between the kale, and eventually the radishes grew really big, started to shade out the kale, but then they were ready to harvest, and so now they're gone and the kale is slowly but surely coming up. You can see a little kale plant here and a dinosaur kale in the back. I have two kinds, meadowlark and dinosaur, and I get my seeds non-GMO from High Mowing Seed Company. And this was just a good way for me to get used to watering something every day and kind of seeing how fast things grow and paying attention to it every single day. You check on it to see if there are any problems that are happening that you might not have foreseen. And in order to fill this bed, here's another permaculture trick. In order to fill this bed, I used a hugelkultur technique, which means I have different layers of materials, organic materials that are breaking down over time, which will continue feeding the bed, therefore reducing the need for fertilizer. So for example, I found some brush and branches from neighbors that they were pruning at the end of summer, and I put that in first, and on top of that I put some dried leaves and then some compost that was in process, so it was just like food scraps mixed with dried leaves. There's my cat. And then I did some wood chips, and finally on top of that I put compost. So I really only ended up using a few bags of store-bought compost. Otherwise it would have taken quite a bit to fill this up, and this way it's going to keep feeding itself over time as the branches break down. And when it got colder, I added more wood chips and some dried leaves on top, and that'll help protect it from frost. It also keeps water from evaporating as quickly. So you've got a dual function. And you might have noticed these DIY hoops I have. It's because I have this white polyethylene cover that I put over it at night to keep out the frost. I also leave it on during the days when it's not too hot. Like today, I just took it off to show you guys. So now that you've completed making a growing space for plants, congratulate yourself. Move on to step 2. The first thing you want to do in the backyard is to observe. Take time to see where the shade falls, what areas get the most sun, how drainage works, and using what's already there. Observe the environment, the way it's already acting. You also want to mark out your paths. Make sure they're wide enough for a wheelbarrow to easily fit down them, so about 3 feet wide. For me, I'm more of a visual person, so what really helped was to outline where I wanted my paths to be and where I wanted certain garden bed areas to be. So to do that, I used some logs that I found also from neighbors. Again, free resources, just reusing, reducing waste, recycled materials. It could be anything. I used logs though. You can kind of see here how there's some logs. And I just outlined like how I wanted it to look, where I wanted certain areas to be planted. And from there you start to get a feel like, okay, this is possible. Here's what we're working with. And the next step is to mulch it in. Kill the grass. Step 3. I went to getchipdrop.com. They're an amazing resource. You can type in your address, what you're looking for, and sign up to get a pile of wood chips delivered to your front door. You just won't know when, but if you're tight on budget, that's the best way to go about it. I got a huge pile. It kind of freaked out the neighbors. That's the fun part of it. And I slowly worked at it and scattered it all across the backyard. You can kind of see behind me wood chips. You want it to be 6 inches in your gardening beds. And I went ahead and did the whole path in wood chips too. This way, when the wheelbarrow's going along it and you're kind of compacting the earth, instead of getting muddy vats all over your backyard, this will absorb water a little better and keep it from getting messy, and that doesn't have to be 6 inches. So you can see here, this is a garden bed, and I didn't have enough wood chips to fill it 6 inches high, so I also added on dried leaves. That's another alternative you can do. Takes lots of leaves. They compact. The reason I think wood chips are the best is because they're going to help prevent evaporation, and they absorb the water really well, and they break down. Just like the hugelkultur technique we talked about before, wood chips are going to break down and create their own soil. It also is smothering out the grass by blocking any sunlight. So you don't have to use any sprays or pesticides or herbicides to get rid of your lawn. You just cover them, smother them with wood chips. You can also lay down 6 layers of newspaper or a layer of cardboard. If you don't have enough wood chips, that's a little cheat for you, and that'll break down as well. The only thing with that is you want to be a little bit careful about the dyes, making sure they're soy-based ink, and the glue in cardboard can be a little harmful. So like if you really want to be safe and you're using this garden space for edible plants, I highly recommend wood chips. Quick tip, keep them from touching the house. When things start to compost and break down, there is a chemical reaction going on there, and it can eat away at wood fences or house sidings. So I just recommend creating some kind of barrier, maybe using cement pavers, whatever you've got on hand to prevent it from having contact. Say your backyard is really rocky or really sandy, and you won't be able to use wood chips and just plant in that. In that case, you want to go ahead with the hugelkultur technique, starting with branches and adding wood chips, really building up a thick layer of soil that you can plant into in the spring. When your roots start to take hold and work their way into the soil, they will break down rock, and you can use leaves as fertilizer to mix in with the sand and create your own layers of soil. What we're doing here is we're building soil. Even I am building soil. I have clay here, so I won't be able to plant directly into the grass for everything I want. And these wood chips are going to start breaking down in 3 to 6 months. You'll see when you pull them back that there's some black soil there, and that's going to be really healthy, really high quality. I also use the hugelkultur technique in another bed in front of me with some branches, so it's a little bit higher than the others, but that was just as an experiment and to use some found scavenged materials to reduce waste. Step 4. If you are growing edibles, you're going to need a consistent supply of fertilizer or nutrients to be adding to your plants. The easiest and cheapest way to do this yourself is by starting a compost pile. Using kitchen scraps, dried leaves, materials from the yard, anything natural will do. What I do is collect food scraps in a container on my kitchen counter every time I cook, and I bring them out here and put it in an old box. It's a recycling container I don't need anymore, and I cover it with the lid, and I add a bunch of leaves every time. So you can see here, I've got some food scraps in here and lots of leaves, and when it gets full, I add it to a pile right here. I've dug out a little hole and I just keep adding it to the trench. I use these wooden pallets as a barrier from the fence because, again, it will eat the fence if it makes contact. And then I have a huge backstock of leaves under this tarp and in those bags. And these are just leaves I collected from neighbors. I found them on the side of the road. People just pile up leaves to be taken away by the city and collect them, bring them back. Fall is the best time to do that, and you want to make sure you get a lot to last you the whole year because leaves get kind of hard to find when it's summer or spring. So, and that's another thing about building the garden beds. Fall is the best time to do it because winter is really going to help everything break down. Anyways. And going back to what you can add to your compost pile, be careful about adding meat. You don't want to add raw meat because it'll attract the wrong kinds of animals to your yard. That can get dangerous, and the bacteria could also be problematic. But if you're worried about animals coming into your compost pile, I'm here to vouch that I've had no problems. I add a lot of leaves, which masks the smell of rotting food. You don't smell it, and it also acts as it kind of prevents animals from being able to smell it as well. And I haven't had any problems. Again, this is suburbia, so it's not like we have bears or really big animals to worry about anyways, other than maybe rats. But haven't seen any rats yet, and I keep it in the farthest corner of my yard, farthest away from the house. I suggest you do that too, especially if you have any concerns like this. If you have any more questions about composting, feel free to ask me or research it yourself. There are books you can read and lots of websites offering help on how to compost. Step 5. Now that you've plotted out where you want your garden to be and you've created a system to continue feeding it throughout the year, it's time to consider what is best suited for your climate, for your yard, and for the different areas of shade and sunlight. This part will require some research, such as the amount of rainfall your area gets, the climate, your freeze dates, and so on. But have fun with this. Plant what you like to eat. If you like vegetables, make a vegetable garden. If you cook with a lot of herbs, have an herb garden nearby. If doing the whole backyard seems like too big of a project for you, or you don't have enough time, just start small. Do a 6 by 6 foot plot. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. And you could even just start with pots if you really wanted to. Just know that if you want to garden and you want to grow food for yourself, there is a way to do it. Don't let time constraints stop you. Just 15 minutes a day is all it takes after you've gotten it planted and set up. Just 15 minutes a day to water it and see if any new bug has come in or any problem. That's all it takes. It's going to be pretty low maintenance, and the whole permaculture technique is using perennial plants, things that come back year after year, like berries and fruit trees, and it's an initial long-term investment. So you do some work now, getting it started, and then 5 years from now, the system is mostly going to be taking care of itself. In a permaculture concept, it doesn't even need irrigation. It should be adapted to the climate. You can use different techniques such as building swales and planting on berms to collect water and have the garden take care of itself. It's also going to develop its own microclimate. And planting diversity is the biggest key to guaranteeing that something is going to work through all the seasons and all the different weather patterns. So have fun designing what's going to be in your backyard, and I'll keep you updated with what's going on in mine. I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions or comments, and happy gardening!